Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about a couple of videos that I found to be very particularly interesting. And, anyways, of course, for those of you that ended up watching the fights this week, and of course, there was a few big fights that were happening this weekend. Of course, there was the UFC 318 card with Dustin Poirier and his final send off fight against Max Holloway. I did not post a fight prediction on that, but pretty much the fight ended up going how I thought that it was going to go, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then, of course, you also had the PBC card, I believe, with Manny Pacquiao returning against current welterweight champion Mario Barrios. Of course, Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora, the rematch on the undercard, as well as Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Brandon Figueroa. And of course, also, you had the Oleksandr Usyk versus Daniel Dubois heavyweight match. Well, the fight that I was personally most excited to see, of course, was Mr. Oleksandr Usyk. Because Oleksandr Usyk, in my personal view, this was not only a very big fight. Danny Dubois had been on a roll, of course, as of recent, beating Filip Pergovic, Jarrell Big Baby Miller, and of course also that of an AJ Anthony Joshua. Although I don't think AJ was quite the same fighter, but still it is what it is. He was on a great roll. And of course, this was going to be a rematch for the opportunity for Oleksandr Usyk to become a three-time undisputed champion at the age of 38 years old. Really 38 and a half or 38 and three quarters, because Oleksandr Usyk, I believe, turns 39 years old in about January or February. And it's almost getting to the point to where I believe that we're getting to a little over half of the year. But anyways, the Oleksandr Usyk fight ended up going exactly how I thought that it was going to go. For those of you, of course, that ended up seeing my fight predictions or my fight breakdowns, I basically predicted that although certain people were stating that Danny Dubois is going to try to rush Oleksandr Usyk this time and he's going to try, to go balls to the wall, Danny Dubois doesn't have that type of style. He's someone that, of course, was preaching quote unquote chaos throughout this whole entire fight. But Danny Dubois is not a guy that's a great brawler. He's someone that is a little bit of a brawler, but he's someone overall that likes to box a little bit, tries to counter over the top, especially with the right hand. He likes to get you with punches in between punches or in between the spaces. He's not someone that will just go up towards you, overall and just completely brawl with you. That's not his type of fighting style. So when people like Showbiz the Adult or some of these other guys basically stated that, oh, well, I think that Oleksandr Usyk, that, overall that he's going to have a lot more trouble in this fight. I mean, I thought that, to be fair, that in the beginning part of the fight that it was going to be a little bit more competitive. But am I surprised whatsoever that the fight ended up how it ended up? No, because Danny Dubois is just a complete wrong type of style for Oleksandr Usyk. And as people say, styles make fights. When you talk about breaking down a fight, you have to analyze that person's style and assess if that person has the right possible advantages or disadvantages in order to win or lose against that particular style. And Usyk pretty much has everything in order to beat a guy like that of a Danny Dubois. But anyways, the reason why I wanted to talk about this video, of course, is because Oleksandr Usyk, now after winning this fight, of course, a lot of people will give him his credit. But for those of you, of course, that know my channel, this isn't just a channel that talks about boxing analytics or, boxing breakdowns. It also talks about a lot of the narratives and the politics, because a lot of, boxing, but not just boxing, a lot of sports and a lot of things in general are really more about the facade. They're more about the smoke and mirrors or what people want to be true really than what the actual reality is. Because they don't like a fighter or they want their favorite fighter to be over that fighter. What we know about Mr. AKHi TV here and DontaesBoxingNation is that they are very racially and politically motivated. So what are they going to do? They're, of course, going to give Usyk his credit by not giving him his credit. And basically, what do I mean by that? Overall, they're going to try to give Usyk credit throughout the video, but basically it's like almost someone giving you an underside or, basically a backhanded compliment. It's almost like when a girl tells another girl overall, like, oh, you look great in those clothes. I could never, wear something if I was that large. Basically overall, trying to pass it off as a compliment, but that shit ain't a compliment. So basically, it's the same shit with AKHi TV and Dante. So what are they going to try to allege? What they're going to try to allege is that Usyk, that he's a great fighter, that's a throwback fighter, but competing in a very weak heavyweight era. That's what they're going to try to do, to basically tear down his resume completely. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what AKHi TV and DontaesBoxingNation have to say.
Congratulations to Usyk for knocking out Daniel Dubois yet again, this time way easier than the last time. The skill level and the IQ between Usyk and Daniel Dubois is not a mile away, but more so the distance between the sun and the moon. This is why I told you guys, despite the low blow controversy from the last fight, I wanted to see Joseph Parker. I knew that Danny Dubois had nothing for Usyk in the rematch. Usyk already had him figured out. From the first...
I agree, but to be fair, I can't remember if AKHi TV was one of the ones talking shit, but he more than likely probably was, because like in regular AKHi TV type of fashion, whenever overall he has an opportunity, especially to tear down a fighter that is a non-black fighter like an Oleksandr Usyk, he basically will, and he'll state that it was a quote-unquote robbery. So although my memory is not serving me, 100% correct, if you were to look back in AKHi TV's videos for that fight review, and if he were to claim overall that Danny Dubois got robbed, don't be surprised, because that's the bullshit that he always pulls. But anyway.
He was popping Danny Dubois with jabs, multiple of them. Meanwhile, Danny Dubois, he was standing at the wrong distance, fighting Usyk fight, and headhunting. Not even go.
Once again, I already told people that Danny Dubois is not someone that's just going to pressure you like an Ajit Caballel. He doesn't do that. He's not someone that gets within, your range and all that stuff. You had so many of these guys overall, once again, like Showbiz the Adult, no offense. Some of these other guys overall claiming that Danny Dubois was just going to go in there and be a true heavyweight. That's not his style.
Into the body. And that's the only way he had his success the last fight. This time around...
Well, Danny Dubois really didn't even have any major success in the last fight. Really, the only success that he had against Usyk was really that one punch to the quote-unquote body, which really, in my view, was a low blow. That was really the only part of the fight that he really was successful in. Other than that, Danny Dubois maybe had a couple right hands, but other than that, he didn't do much else. He basically lost every single round, if not lost every single round in the first fight.
He neglected the body. It wasn't until the third round when he started going to the body and he had some success. But obviously that's not enough. Man, Usyk was doing whatever he wanted in there with Danny Dubois. Usyk single-handedly exposed the heavyweight division of today. How weak.
You hear what AKHi TV basically stated there? Let's rewind that.
It's not enough. Man, Usyk was doing whatever he wanted in there with Danny Dubois. Usyk single-handedly exposed the heavyweight division of today. How weak is it? Because even though everyone thought the cruiserweight division was the weakest division in boxing, truth be told, Usyk had tougher competition fights at cruiserweight than he did at heavyweights.
And at times he did. But let's also talk about the reality of both divisions when Oleksandr Usyk was in them. When Oleksandr Usyk was at the cruiserweight division, that was a division where you had a whole lot of fighters that were undefeated, that were glimmering with confidence. And on top of that, some of them had very good amateur pedigrees or were trained by highly touted trainers. Like when he fought Murat Gassiev, he was trained by Gennady Golovkin's trainer, I believe, Enable Sanchez. When Usyk was competing at the cruiserweight division, you had undefeated Michael Hunter. You had undefeated Glowacki, I believe. You had undefeated, I believe, what was his name? Maris Bredes. You had undefeated Murat Gassiev. You had undefeated Cuban sensation Junior Doricos. Those are all the fighters that you had. Now, if you maybe want to debate that those fighters weren't quite as talented as, say, like a Jai Opetaia or whatever you want to claim, or, whoever the New Zealander's name is, or Australian fighter's name is, that's at the cruiserweight division right now, you can claim that. But all those fighters, in my personal view, you could debate that I just mentioned were A-grade level fighters, at least for the cruiserweight division. He beat Michael Hunter, who would eventually actually get a couple of decent wins in the heavyweight division. Keep in mind that Michael Hunter still only has that one loss to Oleksandr Usyk to this day. Maris Bredes, of course, was an A-grade level fighter at the time. Murat Gassiev was an A-grade level fighter at the time, who was undefeated. Glowacki was debatably an A-grade level fighter at the time. The Polish fighter who knocked out Marco Huck and dominated him. And of course he also fought Marco Huck, but Marco Huck, in my view, was another regular stiff German fighter that didn't really have that much talent. But you could debate it. He was A- if you wanted to. I'd probably debate more B, but that's up to you. But a lot of the other fighters that he's fought there, in my view, yes, they were A grade, at least A-. Then he goes up to the heavyweight division. He defeats that of a Tyson Fury and AJ Anthony Joshua and a Danny Dubois, 3 heavyweight championship level fighters and 3 fighters that I would classify as A grade. Usyk definitely has left a great legacy behind. But anyway,
these guys are
and I'll get into the heavyweight division of this current era in a moment.
too slow for him. All they try to do is land with power, and he can easily see that coming a mile away. This is why Usyk is having so much success at the heavyweight division. These guys are no match for him. Outside of Atama's Moses, man, Usyk can.
I think you mean Moses Itama. You know, AKHi TV, for whatever reason, I never see or hear anyone ever comment about his pronunciation of fighters' names. This dude has the worst pronunciation of fighters' names, him and Dante, that I've ever heard.
They in the heavyweight division today till he probably 50 years old and still dominate because he's on another level than the.
Once again, when you talk about the heavyweights from the past 10 plus years or even the past 7 plus years, you're talking about fighters all the way from AJ Anthony Joshua to Deontay Wilder, you know, to that, I believe, of a, what's his name? Tyson Fury, AJ Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Joseph Parker, Andrew Ruiz, Luis Ortiz, all right, you know, and some other guys that I'm not even mentioning at the current moment in time. Dillian White, Alexander Povetkin, you know, certain guys like that. So to say all this stuff about how the heavyweight division was dead in this era, no, the heavyweight division was not dead in this era. When you want to talk about a heavyweight division that was dead, you're talking about the Mike Tyson era and you're talking about the Vladimir Klitschko era. When you talk about the Vladimir Klitschko era, I'm not stating that he didn't beat some names, but when you talk about, especially in the second half of that fight career, like, who the fuck did he really beat? I mean, you know, he beat guys like Kubrat Pulev and Alexander Povetkin, but he had a major size advantage over some of those guys. Or, I mean, Kubrat Pulev was never really the most skilled fighter in the first place. That's why when Tyson Fury and AJ and Deontay Wilder finally took over the heavyweight division, that's why so much more luster overall went back in that heavyweight division, because the talent had finally started to re-arrive. And by the time overall that had happened, you also had the return of guys like Joseph Parker and guys like Dillian White and other things like that. Now, do I think that a lot of these heavyweights that I just mentioned were as skilled as someone like a Lennox Lewis or an Evander Holyfield or something like that? No. But you also must understand, a lot of these guys are not regular heavyweights. They're super heavyweights. So they're not going to look the same as someone like an Evander Holyfield or Lennox Lewis or some of these guys. They're not always going to have that. They have to use their size and their strength and their strengths to their advantage. They're not going to use, you know, an elite level of speed or an elite level of foot movement if that's not what they have. But this narrative overall that these guys, that they couldn't compete, you know, in any other era, all that is horseshit. Now, if you want to take a look at a weak heavyweight era, that was the Vladimir Klitschko era and the Mike Tyson era, especially the Mike Tyson era. Mike Tyson, no offense against him, but like, who the fuck did he ever beat during his championship years? Like Frank Bruno, a 40-year-old, Larry Holmes, who was off for 2 years, I believe, and lost, you know, 2 fights in a row to an up-and-coming cruiserweight? Like, give me a fucking break.
These guys. He's an old school, skillful fighter. Like, for real, I'm not even exaggerating. These guys are not giving Usyk anything to think about. He can do.
Well, I'm not going to state that. Tyson Fury, in my view, gave him 2 very tough fights. And Tyson Fury, at his best, is a very, 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 very skilled fighter. And I have certain people overall that claim that Tyson Fury is completely overrated. He's not that good of a fighter. Dude, you're talking about a fighter overall that is 6'9" with an 85-inch arm reach. A guy that completely embarrassed Vladimir Klitschko. You know, Klitschko basically couldn't touch him throughout that whole entire fight. Now, the fight wasn't necessarily, you know, a complete landslide in terms of stats, but Fury still clearly beat him. Then he embarrassed Deontay Wilder on 3 separate occasions. And then, of course, he also, I believe, embarrassed out of a Dillian White. Does Tyson Fury have the greatest heavyweight resume of all time? No, he doesn't. But Tyson Fury is an exceptional level, not just a heavyweight, but he's an exceptional level super heavyweight. So to state overall something like Tyson Fury overall won last within any other era, that is nonsense. Anyway.
This in his sleep. Till he's about 50 years old, he can still stay in the heavyweight division and dominate. He has nothing to worry about. Therefore, give the king Usyk.
Well, I don't agree with that. But once again, that's going to be AKHi TV's narrative. Thing is, overall, when you talk about the heavyweight division right now, it still has a great amount of talent. Now, are all the fighters as maneuverable as what they once were? No. But you still overall have certain fighters that have a great amount of talent. Ajit Kabayel, however you pronounce his name, the German fighter, you know, that believe, you know, it looks like he has Middle Eastern descent. That fighter overall can fight. That dude overall is someone that is exceptionally talented. When you talk about, even Jong, he's not someone that in my view is a great fighter, but he's someone that is still relatively talented and he knows how to use his size to his advantage. When you talk about that overall, I believe of an Andrew Ruiz, certain guys like that, although I thought that he lost the last fight against Jarrell Big Baby Miller, Joseph Parker, Martin McCauley, Jared Big Baby Anderson. Take a look overall at Jared Big Baby Anderson. We all thought that Jared Big Baby Anderson was going to be the next thing, and then he lost to one of these bigger, slower heavyweights. So the point being is that this narrative of that these heavyweights just going to compete in any other era, of course they could. If George Foreman overall could be an elite level champion, and George Foreman was basically kind of a big, slow, overall, not super technical big bear during overall the 80s, and a little bit during the 90s as well. So this narrative overall that a lot of these guys that, they couldn't last in any other era, it's just guys overall, once again, that either A, have an agenda like an AKHi TV to try to tear Usyk's resume down, or B, they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Usyk, the last piece of his crown that shouldn't have been taken away from him, as he is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world yet again. And he's going to...
And once again, for anybody that's going to retort with, well, Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis, and Evander Holyfield, they would have destroyed all these fighters of this era. Well, at the end of the day, this is the thing I'm going to tell you. Take a look at Evander Holyfield's fights against Michael Moore and also against Burt Cooper. Burt Cooper was someone that was a journeyman fighter, damn near knocked out Evander Holyfield in that fight. If Burt Cooper can almost beat Evander Holyfield, and if there's some other fighters of that era that also can defeat Evander Holyfield, some of these other guys like AJ Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury would have a chance. It is what it is, all right? Or Deontay Wilder even. And Deontay Wilder is not someone that is a technical prowess fighter, but he's someone that, a lot like George Foreman, he's someone that, kind of swings, and he's a one-dimensional fighter, but he's a very dangerous one-dimensional fighter, And to be honest with you, there's been a certain amount of heavyweights that are like that. There's one per every generation. It is what it is. But anyways, when you talk about Lennox Lewis, if he can lose to Hassan Rahman, if he can lose to Oliver McCall, then of course guys like Usyk or AJ or Fury would have a possible chance of defeating him. And let's also not forget Vitaly Klitschko and the Vladimir Klitschko and the Klitschko brothers. They were basically the beginning of the big and slow heavyweight moving era, or the heavyweight, era. The super heavyweight era, really. And Vitaly Klitschko was giving Lennox Lewis a great amount of work in that fight. So once again, the state overall, once again, that these heavyweights, once again, they're not really heavyweights. A lot of these guys are super heavyweights. But to just claim overall that they would have not lasted in any other era, that's not true.
Sit on that throne until he decides to retire, or until the heavyweight division grows in talent. Hopefully, a Thomas Moses is that guy. But I'm really starting to worry about...
Now, they keep overall bringing up this guy, Moses Itama. And I think that he is an exceptionally talented fighter. I think that it would be a very interesting fight. But I think that more than likely that Usyk is not going to be interested in that fight. And I don't necessarily blame him, because right now Moses Itama, he just doesn't bring anything to the table. He's someone that is extremely, talented, but he's not someone that really has any big names on his record as of yet. Of course, he faces Dillian Whyte next in his career. I think Dillian Whyte has probably seen a little bit too much wear and tear, but he's still one of the probably top 10 contenders. So, we'll see what happens, or at least top 15. So, we'll see. But I think more than likely that if Usyk fights, it's only going to be a couple more times. And I just don't see him fighting Moses Itama. I don't think that he would really see a reason for that. But, we'll see. But the next fight that I hope we see is him versus Joseph Parker.
Shape of the heavyweight division. Yeah, as soon as Usyk retires, the door is going to open for the heavyweight division to be taken. But taken by who? You guys saw how Usyk is whooping these boys. It's easy work. He did Tyson Fury dirty. He did Anthony Joshua dirty. He's doing Danny Dubois dirty. And he's going to continue doing that.
Remember, AKHi TV and DontaesBoxingNation at one point in time had Deontay Wilder top 4 and top 5 pound per pound. That was their words. They were claiming that Deontay Wilder, that if he beats Tyson Fury, that he was going to be all these things. And keep in mind, does Deontay Wilder have any of the names on his resume that Oleksandr Usyk does? The only name that he has on his resume is Luis Ortiz. But I'm supposed to believe that Usyk is a part of a quote-unquote weak era. No, it was a part of a weak era all of a sudden when Deontay Wilder, their favorite fighter, especially because of the racialist element, all of a sudden he wasn't winning anymore. Then all of a sudden they had no interest in the heavyweight division anymore.
When he goes away,
Well, remember, never forget, they had Deontay Wilder top 4 pound per pound at one point in time. Don't believe me. Look it up, back when Deontay Wilder was undefeated and a champion. Go ahead, look it up. They had Deontay Wilder top 4 pound per pound. This is according to AKHi TV and DontaesBoxingNation and a lot of the LDBC. They had Deontay Wilder top 10 pound per pound. And then as soon as Wilder lost, all of a sudden it was a weak heavyweight era. Now get the fuck out of here. And Deontay Wilder never defeated anyone that was really that good. He defeated Luis Ortiz, who was very good. But other than that, he didn't defeat anybody.
lower opposition fighters are going to get their hands on Usyk throne, which that's not necessarily going to bring the heavyweight division back to life. And as good as Usyk is, he's out here.
He's not just good. He's great. And he's an all-time great. But of course, a part of the reason for this once again is because they realize that Usyk is a threat to be remembered as debatably the best of his generation, and they can't have that.
Fighting. But the majority of the public doesn't even know that because they don't know him. To make matters,
well, we'll see the pay-per-view numbers on that. We'll see. Because Oleksandr Usyk, I believe, is a widely known fighter. Do I believe that he's the quote-unquote face of boxing like a Canelo? Maybe not, but he's someone that definitely has gained a lot of traction and a lot of steam, especially after recently defeating both AJ Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, who were superstars, especially all across Europe.
it's worse. I paid $30 for my subscription on DAZN, and I gotta pay $60 to watch this fight. On top of that, that's $90. What are we doing here? I'm glad.
Right, the same shit that Showtime had been doing for a while with the PBC overall, and other shit. Or if you have to pay for Amazon Prime every month, But you have a problem with it all of a sudden when DAZN and Eddie Hearn does it because you don't like their company. Like, come on.
Turkey talking about he's gonna get rid of pay-per-views, which I'm gonna talk about that on another video. With that being said, go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for this video. Let's move on to the next one, to Dante's Boxing Nation, and see what he has to say. All right, so let's now see what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Oleksandr Usyk, he gets another impressive knockout win over Daniel Dubois to become the undisputed heavyweight champion again. But he did it even earlier this time with no controversy. He knocks him out in the 5th round with his favorite punch to left hand.
Once again, Dante's Boxing Nation, what he always loves to do with certain fighters is that he loves to bring up this quote-unquote controversy point. And that's a part of the reason why he also loves to use this against Canelo, where he says, well, you can't really count Canelo's wins over Golovkin or Lara because a lot of people thought overall that he lost those fights. Okay, well then why don't we use this with every fighter in history? Why don't we use it with Sugar Ray Leonard? If we use this overall with every fighter within the history of boxing, you're going to find that a lot of those fighters, that they're not really looked at as all-time great. There are a bunch of people that thought Muhammad Ali lost every single fight to Kenny Norton. And Kenny Norton, other than Muhammad Ali, really didn't beat a whole lot of other elite level fighters. So does that mean that Muhammad Ali is massively overrated? Just because overall he lost to Kenny Norton a multitude of times, and he also lost to Joe Frazier. And he also lost to an 8-0 Leon Spinks, someone that really didn't do shit after that in his career. Is that what that means? Does it mean that Sugar Ray Leonard, who a lot of people thought did not beat Tommy Hearns in the rematch, did not beat Marvin Hagler, lost to Roberto Duran moving up 2 weight classes? Does that mean that Sugar Ray Leonard overall is massively overrated? A lot of people didn't think that Andre Ward won the Sergey the Crusher Kovalev fight. I personally don't believe that he won the first Crusher Kovalev fight, at least by a little bit. I thought Kovalev won by a round in that fight. Also Mayweather. A lot of people don't believe that he won the Castillo fights. Personally, I haven't watched those fights in a while, so I can't comment on them on my own. But the point is that don't just use this point overall with the non-black fighters that you want to tear down overall and then claim overall that you're all about, equality and fairness. No, you're not. So that's why, once again, I review these videos, because you notice that he always brings up these points with certain fighters that are non-black fighters, but he never brings it up with guys like a Crawford or a Sugar Ray Leonard or an Andre Ward or anyone else like that.
The fight played out pretty much the way I thought it would. I told you guys before, Usyk, he has terrific foot movement, and I felt that Dubois, he was too slow with his feet and his hands to keep up with Usyk. But credit goes to Usyk.
As did I.
Because he did a great job of displaying the sweet science. Hit and not get hit. And honestly, Usyk, he's lucky that he has the complexion for the protection, because if he didn't, they would be calling him a runner. Because if you notice, he moved more than Shakur Stevenson did last weekend. But
Well, Oleksandr Usyk did do a lot of moving around, and one thing I will state is that Caucasian fighters or Caucasoid fighters or that of other fighters that they're not, that they don't usually get called runners, even if what they do, at times could be quote unquote running around. That oftentimes that is a stereotype against black fighters because, they basically can't find a way in order to defeat the slick style. I agree with DontaesBoxingNation on that. Belay may also claim this because, of course, he's going to be talking about the Shakur Stevenson comparison. Shakur, a part of the reason why he's gotten so much criticism as of late, although, of course, the Williams Zepeda performance, I think, has helped out his career a lot. But a part of the reason why Shakur has gotten so much criticism is because at times he is facing B and C grade level competition, and it's taken him 9 rounds, or sometimes he's not even stopping these guys. And I've never seen Usyk have a performance in his career over a B grade level fighter the way that Shakur Stevenson had over Edwin De Los Santos. Just saying.
Usyk did, it was not running, it was boxing. He stayed off the ropes, he circled, he used angles, he set up traps by jumping back and catching Dubois with the left over and over again until he knocked him out. But there was a moment where it looked like Dubois, he started to get Usyk's timing down. Because in the third round, Dubois, he started to come in with his high guard, and then he started bobbing and weaving. He was actually slipping more of Usyk's punches in that round. And he caught Usyk with a couple jabs and a couple right hands. What he was doing is he was staying small, and he was trying to close the gap, because if he stands up straight or he pulls back, he leaves himself open for the left hand. And that's exactly what happened after he started to bob and weave. For some reason, Dubois, he starts standing up straight again and pulling back out, and that's how he got.
Because that's his style. Once again, I don't know why so many people, if you had watched Dubois and seen even him in his last 3 fights, what makes you think that Dubois is a pressure fighter? He's not that guy. He's a guy, once again, that likes to go in and out a little bit. He likes to punch in between the punches and to punch in between the spaces. That's what he likes to do. He's not this guy that's just going to go out there balls to the wall and try to overall just, completely, bulldoze Usyk. That wasn't going to happen.
Got caught with the left hand and ultimately got knocked out. So there's no doubt about it. Usyk has proved that he's the best heavyweight right now. There's not too many athletic heavyweights in the division right now, but I would really like to see.
Oh, please. When you talk about great athletes overall in the division, there's a ton of great athletes in the heavyweight division. When you talk about, but athleticism, of course, can be quantified in different ways. Tyson Fury is a great all-around athlete. Now, is he the quickest ever? Necessarily no, but he still has great hand speed for his size. He's someone that has great movement for his size. He's someone that has great power for his size. We've seen it against Deontay Wilder, Klitschko, and Dillian White. When we see Joseph Parker, he's a very great athlete. He's someone that is very strong and also very fast. When you talk about Andrew Weiss, he's someone that doesn't have the best of feet in my personal view, but he's very powerful, very fast, someone that has a very good boxing technique at his absolute best. When you talk about that of an AJ Anthony Joshua, he's a little bit stiff, but he's someone that's a great athlete. He's someone that's very powerful, very strong, and on top of that, decently quick at his best. Not as quick as Usyk, of course, but, it is what it is. This is the thing I'm going to state. And, of course, Deontay Wilder was a great athlete as well. So all this bullshit about, they're not great athletes, all this is to diminish Usyk's accomplishments. Anyway.
How Usyk would look against an athletic heavyweight, someone like an Itama, because
he's already fought athletic heavyweights. Danny Dubois, Tyson Fury, and Anthony Joshua, they're all athletic heavyweights. Now, I understand what Dante is trying to state. I think that he's talking about the combined strength with the speed, someone like a Moses Itama. But the point is this. Let's not do this bullshit where Oleksandr Usyk just hasn't faced anyone athletic in the heavyweight division ever.
Moses Itama is one of those athletic type of heavyweights, but he is a little too green right now. He most likely won't be ready for a title shot for probably another year. He's going to fight against Dillian White, and I assume he's...
Once again, keep an eye out for DontaesBoxingNation or AKHi TV once again to claim that if Usyk does not fight Moses Itama within the next year or two, that he's quote-unquote ducking Moses Itama. Although Usyk could probably get more out of fighting other fighters, that probably have won belts before or probably have more of a substantial career. And I'm not stating that Moses Itama eventually may not earn his shot, but just keep in mind overall that don't be surprised. And in my view, it's probable that AKHi TV and DontaesBoxingNation within the next year, they're going to allege that Usyk is going to avoid that of a Moses Itama.
One else. And then after that, he'll probably fight for the title. But for now, I guess Usyk, he's going to end up fighting against Joseph Parker, which will be an interesting fight.
Great fight.
Just because Parker, he also uses a
I would also love to see Oleksandr Usyk versus Oleksandr Ruiz.
lot of foot movement. But neither one of them have to worry because, once again, no one is going to call these guys runners. We know what time it is. Now, something else that would make an Usyk versus Itama fight interesting is the fact that,
once again, notice overall, once again, how he keeps pushing this guy. You know why they keep pushing this guy? Because the reason why they're pushing this guy is because they're going to try to allege that in his next fight, if he ends up defeating Dillian Whyte in dominant fashion, which I assume more than likely that he will, they're going to start alleging that Oleksandr Usyk is ducking that of a Moses Itama. Just watch.
they're both southpaws. Because Usyk is so good at using his advantage of fighting left-handed. You see those beautiful exits that Usyk uses when
Now notice what DontaesBoxingNation just stated. He said his advantage of fighting left-handed. Now, oftentimes, if we're just going to take a look at it overall from a non-emotional or racist or non-racial standpoint, but I can't really take a look at it from that angle from DontaesBoxingNation because we always know that he has some sort of a racialist angle. So, I mean, it is what it is. But if we're going to take a look at it, of course, from that angle, of course, southpaws oftentimes do have an advantage in boxing because overall, a lot of orthodox or right-handed fighters are just not used to that style. And they have to change up their tune a little bit. They may have to use different punches. They may have to use a different game plan and fight at different angles. So, of course, it definitely can be an advantage. But it's just interesting that he states overall that Oleksandr Usyk's advantage. Did we ever hear this with Terrence Bud Crawford when he fights overall southpaw? I don't think I've ever heard DontaesBoxingNation ever say that Terrence Bud Crawford, that when he fights southpaw, or Rigondeaux or Lara, that when they fought southpaw, that it was a quote-unquote advantage. It's just interesting that all of a sudden that Usyk, that he has this advantage. So my question is this, for people watching this, is he stating that because it's a quote-unquote fact and he's doing it from a purist boxing standpoint, or is he doing it once again to try and diminish Usyk's accomplishments so we can say, well, Usyk is a southpaw in most of his fights, that's why overall he had the edge and looked so good in a lot of his fights? If I had to guess, it's probably the latter.
he dips to the right and he throws his jab at the same time, which completely nullifies the right hand if he's fighting against an orthodox fighter.
Basically, once again, what I said was correct. So what Dante is trying to allege here is that, see, because he's in the southpaw position and he dips, it basically nullifies the right hand, right? But there are ways to fight a southpaw. At the end of the day, overall, you don't just shove your right hand in there, overall, if he's dipping down to the right. You have to overall set it up with the jab. You also have to use a left hook. You also do have to use a right hand, but you have to set it up to the point where his head is going to get there. If you repeatedly allow him to move his head to the right, then of course it's going to be a problem. But you have to be able to do that. But the thing is, once again, is that Usyk has defeated a multitude of very, very decent fighters.
Well, he won't have that weapon against another left-hander. I feel if Moses Itama can just get one big win, like beating someone in the top 5 or the top 3, that's going to make for a really, really big matchup against Usyk. So let's see how...
Definitely would be very interesting if that fight were to happen. I'm not quite sure if Usyk is really looking at anyone else other than guys like Joseph Parker or Fury or AJ. But in my personal view, we don't need AJ or Fury anymore. We already seen what happened in those fights. But the fight that I would really love to see next is Joseph Parker. Then after that, I'm not really quite sure. But Usyk, as he states, he doesn't really have that much more time left, but we'll see.
He performs against Dillian Whyte and see who he chooses to fight after that. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it. But once again, for those of you that noticed or know how to read in between the lines, you probably see a lot of the discredit that AKHi and Dante, of course, both tried to give to that of Oleksandr Usyk. But it is what it is. I just wanted to talk about that once again because a lot on my channel, I also talk about the politics of boxing. And there's no offense against Dante and AKHi TV, but it's pretty much what I expected of them from this fight. Because, of course, if Usyk is remembered as the greatest of his generation, first of all, that means that Crawford can't be. And second of all, when it comes down to it, that would mean that a Caucasoid fighter like a Usyk could be remembered as one of the greatest of all times, which means what? That he could be included within the top 10 or top 20 of all time. I assure you, once again, I'll probably be doing more videos about this because Oleksandr Usyk, once again, this is going to be another conversation because people are starting to put him in the top 10, the top 20 of all time, and Dante can't have that. Because what these guys' worst fears are, Dante and AKHi TV and some of these other LDBC or new media guys, they're afraid that the Muhammad Ali's and the Sugar Ray Leonards and the certain guys like that are going to start to get replaced with certain guys like Canelo Alvarez and Oleksandr Usyk. And don't get it twisted, there is a big narrative at times to put non-black fighters in the top 20 or top 10 of all time, even at times when they don't necessarily deserve to be there as of yet. But the problem is with Dante's Boxing Nation and certain guys like these is that they look at a guy like Usyk or Canelo, guys overall that could be within at the very least the top 20 or top 30 of all time. Some may even debate the top 10 of all time. And they'll basically do everything they can to argue against that, even when the facts are laid out on the table that those guys are all-time great level fighters. That's why they always have to diminish Canelo Alvarez and Oleksandr Usyk, but yet there's no diminishing of Terrence Bud Crawford. Everyone that he fights is elite. Everyone that he fought was at the prime of their career. All this other stuff, everyone that he fought was an A-grade level fighter or extraordinarily talented. So once again, just keep an eye out for that. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I thought that I would talk about that. Peace out for now. I'll talk to you all later.